right. So this is the 35th episode of the Mental Breakthrough.
Lucky
And,
35.
yeah, that's right. And so Josh, Converse, it's been decades since we've would have physically seen each other. We went to high school together, and I know I've chimed in on some posts here and there, so I kind of got some ideas of where you've gone since high school, but I kind of really like the life story, so I don't know much about you. I mean, it's not like we were like close friends in high school or anything. The main memory I have of you is the English class that we had together, because we were kind of sitting across from each other, always trying to outwit each other, I think. And then, of course, the notorious trench coat that you were expelled. We'll have to get into that. Why I think you were expelled, because that was like after the Columbine incident, and I don't think you did anything aside from wearing a trench coat that got you expelled. So that's really interesting. What's interesting, I mean, we were both kind of outcast in our own way. Yeah, you were there. You were a trench coat. That kind of sums it up. I was a wrestler, kind of, where we're not jocks. Like, even though I did play football, you actually played football 1 year. I remember I
Briefly, yes.
Freshman. I mean, I sucked. I sucked all 4 years. I was really just doing it to stay in shape for wrestling. But so, I think you've moved around. I moved around a lot before going to Orville too. I think you somebody. So let catch us up to that, and then we'll talk about high school a little while. Maybe we'll get some old friends listening to this to catch up. But maybe give me a life story that kind of led you to Orville High School or Orville in general.
Sure. So I was born in the Bay Area. My mother and father, though, met in Chico. She was a bartender and he was a security guard, and like in their early 20s, got married. That didn't go super well. He wasn't a great guy. He's dead now, but he was very briefly in the picture, really. Quite abusive, alcohol, all that stuff. And I only met him once as an adult. He was living like in a trailer up in Palermo. And it was like every white trash stereotype you can imagine, like the dog chained up in the yard and the 50 dead cars on the lot, and the kid with the unchanged diaper running around with no clothes on. It's like the grandkid of the fifth wife or something like that. Like, it's all that.
Yeah.
But the saving grace was that my grandparents were in the picture, and they really helped. And so she was an Irish Catholic from San Francisco Bay Area, and he's a New York Jew, Ashkenazi Jew from New York. And so when they got married, you can imagine, there were people who on both sides were like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But they had a big hand in raising me and helping out. And my mom had a couple of marriages, and those didn't go great. And I ended up living for some period of time with my grandparents in Louisiana. They had a horse farm, so it was like being Tom Sawyer.
Yeah.
But and then ultimately, I had a brother and sister. My mom and stepdad had those kids, and I wanted to know them and be in their lives. And I knew, I was dumb. I was like 13, and I thought, well, my grandparents watch me like a hawk, and they make sure I do honor roll grades, and they're on top of me, and my mom won't do that.
Okay. Yeah.
So I went with my mom, which, it would have been a whole different life if I hadn't. But I got to, know my siblings, and those are great relationships that I'm happy to have. But of course, it's pretty much on my own to do what I wanted in Oroville. That stepfather is now doing time in prison for murder. So, that didn't go great. He was kind of on the lam on the couch for like years, and just kind of this black hole.
Yeah.
So that was high school days. right? Living with that.
Oh, okay.
And my mom going back to school. She went to Butte and then she went to CSU Chico and became a teacher, which she still is. I think she'll retire in the next couple of years. But yeah, that was the situation kind of coming into high school. Was kind of troubled, angry kid, had moved around a lot and was now, you know, the cat's kind of away because my mom is so busy going to school and doing other things. So I could kind of do what I wanted to do, which was probably quite destructive in retrospect. But, you know, that's what the situation was.
Okay. Well, so did you go to middle school in Orville? Or
No, I came at the very end, like the last 6 weeks of 8th grade.
Okay.
That's how unceremonious it was when I left Louisiana. But like the last 6 weeks of 8th grade, I came in and was at Nelson,
Okay.
like very briefly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I went to Central and then so yeah. So then yeah, I remember. I mean, is that the year? Was it your freshman year you came out football? I mean, you were there for a while, or just was it just?
No, I mean, I think I did it a bit, and then maybe like the second game, I was like, I don't really care about playing football. Am I going to do it?
Yeah.
You know, something like that. And I wasn't fast. You know, I was supposed to be a receiver, but I wasn't fast.
We,
you know, I was going to get creamed.
Yeah, our only objective was our only objective was to just run as far as you can. We've never in 4 years, I don't think we ever threw the ball. There might have been a wing pass to like a running back or something. You know, right. I don't know I ever remember ever throwing to the receiver. We were just trying to take one guy far from away. That was the only job. And yeah, no, in some ways I was like, why did I play football for these guys? I sucked. I was the last string, everything. And then, but anyway, so yeah, that's did you do any other? Did you go out for track or anything or?
No. So, I did Kempo at Robert Alcorn's dojo on Huntoon Street.
Okay, were we there together then?
I don't think we ever were at the same time, but okay. I did that for some years.
Okay, yeah. No, I did because I was with him before. There's actually Guy Bercali had a gym, and then Robert Alcorn took over, and then I was training with him. I trained with him throughout high school though, but I did stop. I went less. That's weird. Wait, where at? On like this street that's
right by the
overpass?
The train tracks where all those bats would nest inside that tunnel.
Yeah. Okay, wow, that's crazy there, yeah.
Well, because I had like no money, like there was no money. Yeah. So I went to him and I was like, look, you know, I can't pay anything. Can I do like work around the thing and then just hang out and do classes? So I got like a hand-me-down gi, and like he'd have me with a newspaper and Windex, like wipe down the windows, wipe down all the mirrors. He had this big long wall of mirrors, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think I ended up investing in like a $20 Boken.
Yeah.
You know, and eventually I got some Arnie sticks and a Joe staff.
Yeah.
And I would just stay, you know, until my mom would pick me up at like 7 or, you know, whenever. On those days when I could do it. So I could just walk down from school and do that.
Okay, nice. Yeah. And then one of the interesting things that let's stay in high school. So like I said, high school is interesting, right? I mean, high school is an interesting time. I mean, you kind of gave some backstory about that. Yeah, what were your memories of me? You remember that? What was that, Mr. McKinnon's class that McKinnon's class? Well, we're the lucky few that had him before he, or may rest in peace. You saw that he recently passed away, kind of maybe a year ago or something.
Yeah,
and he left Orville and started teaching at Butte. I think that we were the last people who had him. So that was a really amazing class. I imagine probably in some ways, he was inspiration for me to want to be a teacher. Just his style was definitely cool. Definitely in high school, that was to get that was good. So that was my main memory. Then of course the trench coat and everything. But and then yeah, it's just I remember football. I remember, I don't know, I just remember like Casey Corbally or something. Just I just like maybe just coming out of nowhere, just nailing you as hard as he possibly could or something. And that's what he did, right?
He was a big dude.
I think I remember that, and I remember thinking like, feeling like, oh shit, man, yeah, I know how that is. Yep, that one, he got. Yeah, those are some memories. It's weird. There's so few memories.
I remember you running with Tamori for the wrestling. Just you guys like were just going by all the time. He just ran you guys.
Yeah, I had to cut weight, man. It sucks because in wrestling, it's cool because it's fair. It's not, there's no seniority. Like, I mean, in football, there is more seniority. Like they already had their team because they did the, Pop Warner and stuff. And plus they're good. I never learned the play. So I admit, I never really put that much effort into it. But in wrestling, it's like you have a match prior to the duel meet, and it doesn't matter how old you, what grade you are or weight you. And we had, I don't know if you know Todd Gaylord. He was a year younger than me and just an awesome athlete. And he was at 125s, and he'd just beat me out. If I wanted to start, I had to cut the weight or go up. But I think somebody at 130s could beat me. So yeah, I just had to cut that weight. I made the same weight basically all 4 years. I made it to 112s my freshman year. And then I was growing, but I kept making 119s because that was the only spot I could find. So that's the main reason I was running. Yeah, wearing the plastic bag underneath the clothes and that stuff. But it did a lot for my character. I mean, it kind of makes us, eccentric to some degree. And yeah, you're an eccentric character too. So, yeah. Anything else about high school though? I mean, there is that aspect of, I mean, you mentioned now that, yeah, I mean, the home was, you probably didn't want to be at home as much. You were trying to do things, or at
it's what you get used to, right? Like you live in a thing, you kind of think it's normal.
Yeah.
Until you don't, especially when you're young, you just take everything as it is.
Yeah.
You have no frame of reference in many ways. I mean, I suppose I did with like my grandparents, but my mom was my mom, and this was the life situation that it was. And what are you going to do? And again, none of this is a knock on her or anything. I think she did her very best for us, but it's just, life happens sometimes.
Yeah.
And, you make the decisions you make and you live with them. And, God knows there are things I would do differently with it, with more wisdom, but it sort of is what it is. Right. So, I think there did come a point, right, where I wanted out. Like I wasn't interested in school. The things I went for, the things I lived for were things like going to English class, right, McKinnon and stuff like that. And had Brown one year. That was good. Summers was good. And then I'd do French class that I'd show up for, and I would do theater because I thought that's what I was going to do.
Okay.
It was like Shakespearean theater, like that.
Yeah.
It's funny. So there was a teacher at Nelson named Molly Malone who read something I was writing and was like, "Oh, you're coming with us to Ashland." It was like that last 8 weeks or whatever. And I'm like, "Oh, yeah. There's no money for me to go to Ashland." And she like made it happen. Okay. And she arranged for me to be able to go. And that was my first experience, like going to Shakespearean plays. Yeah. And she took me to a sushi restaurant, which I'd never been to. And I had like my first sushi. And so huge sushi guy now, like love it. But one of the things I was writing was a werewolf story. And now it's like I've written 2 novels about werewolves. I kind of want to send them to Molly and be like,
Yeah,
thanks.
you're published, right? You're published.
Yeah.
2 books now. Okay, I knew of one. I remember.
Yeah. So, but the thing is like, that shaped me in many ways. Like I got to Ashland and I saw those plays and I went, "Oh, I'll be a Shakespearean actor. That's what I'll do. I don't need algebra. I don't, like kids are, right?" I was so sure I knew the way things were going to go, like you do when you're young and dumb.
Yeah.
And so that's what I thought I was working towards. But like I left high school. I mean, we can talk about the whole trench coat thing.
Yeah.
But like when I left, I had a 0.6 grade point average, something like that. Like I had not care. I did not care.
Yeah.
And I can look back now and see the kid I was and go, because you're kind of in survival mode, right? But I didn't know that at the time. Um, I just knew there are certain things I care about and a lot of things I don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is sort of the nature of survival, isn't it? It just clarifies what you actually care about. And so I thought, I'll go do that. I don't need all this other stuff. But then the Columbine thing happens. And I'll admit, like, I didn't really understand it. I didn't have the like forensic details of what it was.
Yeah.
And
Nobody
so
does.
in
Novel.
some ways I was kind of flippant about it, at the time. And, now I would proceed quite differently than I did.
Sure.
There's a lot I didn't know. And so my feeling was, yeah, we're the couple of kids who wear trench coats. It's the 90s, we're wearing trench coats, right? I like the Matrix, whatever,
Yeah.
But the thing happens on April 20th, Hitler's birthday. And the next day, one of the people in my group who wears a trench coat gets accused of something. I'm not going to name any names or anything, but like gets accused of something that he definitely was not, like, not a violent person, definitely lover, not fighter kind of human. And the vice principal at the time decided, oh, well, you're expelled, and your expulsion hearing where you can like defend yourself will happen in the summer. So this is April.
Yeah.
Right. So effectively your junior year's over.
Yeah.
And the next day it happened to another friend of mine. And then there was like this war council with all the families at one of the houses, like, and my mom is going, this is going to go on your permanent record. Don't go back. Start summer early and go to a charter school for your senior year and just defuse the bomb.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I'm going to go, and I'm going to wear a trench coat. And there's no reason I shouldn't. I didn't do anything wrong. Right. And I'm so self-righteous. But ultimately, starting summer early and not having to do any more school work sounded attractive.
Mm-hmm.
So we just started hanging out in Chico all the time. And you remember what Chico was like in those days. You didn't need like an ID.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have friends. So basically that was kind of my departure. And they set me up in a charter school, but I never went. Like, I was always in Chico and pretty much just couch surfed among friends and didn't really go home. Maybe I'd go home on Sunday sometimes, and then eventually like not at all.
Yeah.
Just kind of left and met somebody, and we kind of bounced around, she and I, for like a year. And then the plan was going to be, we're going to work and go to school, go to junior college or whatever. And the recruiter came knocking. Hey, I have a better idea, he said.
Okay.
So I was 17, and my mom says, okay, join the army. That's good. But this other thing with this girl, like, because I was saying like, oh, we'll get married. And she was like, maybe don't do that. Maybe go to basic training. Don't get married while you're in, right? Or, and I was 17 and I knew everything like you do when you're 17. And I said to her, like, if you sign the papers, you can come to the wedding. If you don't, I'll get married in, it was like 2 weeks. I'd be 18 and you're not invited.
That's nice ultimatum.
That's cold-blooded, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, I'm gonna slap myself in the face. So she signed the papers. We got married in Reno on the night of the senior prom. Okay. Senior prom in Oroville. I'm in Reno, getting funny. Married.
I didn't even know any of that. Yeah. Yeah.
And 2 days after I turned 18, I shipped out to basic training. It was May of 2000, the year 2000. So that was me leaving.
Yeah.
And
So at that
I
point,
haven't.
you didn't graduate, you didn't get a GED. I mean,
I got a GD because I
you
had to, but that was a very easy test to take.
before the, yeah, I mean, yeah, because you're smart. I mean, that's what I mean, I know you're smart. You just didn't care about school.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So okay, you could just take a test. That was prior to getting in. That was necessary to go to basic. I mean, to get in. Okay, they won't take somebody that doesn't have it. Okay.
Yeah, you needed somebody who had it. So I took a GD. It was like I don't remember how many hours, 4 or 6 hour test or something.
Yeah.
And then, I'm always been a reader. I've always been
Yeah.
curious and interested in information. I get itchy about institutions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And so the whole school institution thing, I was just in
Sure.
total rebellion,
Sure. Yeah.
problem with authority sort of fellow. And that's how it went. Was so problem with authority, join the army. Great idea.
Yeah. No, that's funny. Yeah. How was that? The basic training and I mean, is it
So I expected, because my stepfather had been in the army and he had sort of prepared, like he
okay?
had me thinking it was going to be like SEER school or Ranger school, kind of like difficult, right? Full Metal Jacket kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that. I went to Fort Jackson. It wasn't a combat arms thing. I was intelligence or whatever. And that's what they said anyway. Mostly we lifted heavy boxes and PMCS vehicles, but whatever. That's what happened.
Scored high
And
on
so,
linguistics on your. You took it ASVAB and
yeah.
linguistics. Yeah. Okay. Obviously.
Yeah. So, yeah, I went and did that. And our first deployment was in the summer of 2000, and we were there in theater in the Middle East when the planes hit the towers.
Okay. Yeah.
That was my first deployment. And then,
Yeah.
my second deployment, we were there during the buildup before the invasion of Iraq and stayed through, mission accomplished.
So by deployment, you're sent to Iraq or
in the Middle East
or something, okay, or Bahrain or somewhere. I don't know what.
Yeah, like Kuwait.
Okay, cool. Okay, so okay, wow, okay. So you served, how does that work? You signed up. You were locked in for 4 years or something, or
Yeah, I signed up for 4 years. And so here's something kind of funny. Everybody in my unit, it seemed like everybody in my unit, we came back from that deployment, the first deployment after 9/11, came back after 9/11. I think Thanksgiving Day we came back to a very different country in many ways than the one we had left. So that was strange. But then also, like, almost everybody in my unit got, like, their wives got pregnant when they got back, or they got pregnant if they were female. Like, everybody gets pregnant.
Yeah.
And then the second time,
or because you had, or
yeah, we did.
Yeah,
we did. Yeah, that's my oldest. And the second time, everybody gets divorced, us included.
Oh wow, yeah.
Right, because that's the tradition.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's complex and there are many factors, that sort of thing, right? But like, so I turned 21 on the second deployment in like a dry country, came back, the divorce happens, and then I've got like 6 months before I'm getting out, and then thought, well, maybe I'll do law enforcement or something like that. And I was talking I had interviewed with the San Jose Sheriff's Office, and they had 3 openings, and I think I ended up being like number 4 guy. Right, close but no cigar.
Yeah.
So they offered me a corrections officer job, that I could be a jailer at San Mateo County Jail. And I said, I'm not interested in being a jailer. Like, what I'm interested in is not even really patrol, but like detective work, and you have to pay your dues to get there. You have to, you do have to be on patrol and do
Yeah.
regular cop stuff for a while before you get to that place. I thought, well, I'll do that, and maybe that'll do some good, right?
Mhm.
Investigate the actually bad people. I don't care about writing people tickets,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like real bad people, yeah, maybe that'd be good. So I turned down that job, which was in retrospect like a destiny altering decision.
Sure.
Um, and I said, I'll just go, I'll put myself through a police academy with a GI Bill, and I'll have a post certification that'll make me more marketable, and I'll just throw out applications, right?
Mhm.
So there was one opening in March, I think it was, in San Mateo, or in that area at De Anza College. And there was one opening at MPC, Monterey Peninsula College in Monterey. So I said, oh, I'll do the one in Monterey because it's starting in February and I'm getting out, I'm starting terminal leave in February. So 2 days after I was out, down in Monterey at the school where I now teach,
Okay. Yeah.
I did the police academy thing, and sort of realized, it wasn't something I was going to ultimately pursue, because it seemed to me like even if you do your job, there's a good chance you can be sued or
Oh. Oh
you know
yeah.
what I mean? Or like, it's,
Yeah.
even if you do everything you're supposed to do, they'll throw you under the bus potentially.
Sure. Yeah.
So I decided I wasn't going to do that. And so I just bounced around and did security work for some years. I worked as an armed guard up at the Defense Language Institute, which is an army post on the Presidio here in Monterey. Um, I did one thing and another, and I got a job as a security specialist for the YWCA here in Monterey, which does like, they have a safe house for people who are fleeing domestic violence situations, women and children, stuff like that. So I was doing that. And my boss looked at me one day and she's like, "What are you doing here?" I said, you hired? I work here. She's like, "Yeah, but what are you doing here?" I said, "Well, you hired me to be here." She's like, "You're much too smart to be doing this. Go back to school. Go to school." So I went to college. I went back and started taking classes at MPC, at the school where I now teach.
Okay.
As an undergrad, I met my now wife there.
Okay.
And yeah, it was a long journey from there to like a master's degree in literature, which, I started doing theater things. I thought, oh, well, I can maybe still do the theater thing possibly.
Okay.
But no, I took an English literature class, and I walked over and physically filled out the paper form to change my major back when you did that sort of thing, as you
Yeah.
remember,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and started down that road. And so ended up going, because I wanted to be in the area. Um, Ended up going to UC Santa Cruz, which was quite an arranged marriage because I'm not of that political stripe by and
Yeah.
large.
Banana slug.
Um,
Are they banana slug?
and yeah,
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
that's
That's
right.
cool. That's cool.
And then I got my master's from San Francisco State,
Okay.
and that was a commute. And like a month after I got that degree, I had a job. Like the phone rang, "Hey, you need to apply," from a friend, and I applied and I got the job. And it's been 8 years. 8 years I've
Okay.
been doing that.
Nice. And so when did you get published? I remember, yeah. So I remember one post. Yeah, I remember Werewolves was your things, right? You had like Anne Rice or something responded to you, right? Or your mom
That's
hooked
true.
that up or told her that you something.
No,
I don't know.
no,
I remember something that yeah, I remember you having.
yeah. Just that, she had written something and I ended up posting a review on Amazon, and she like puts it up on her Facebook page and is like, "This is a great review. It's
Oh,
very intelligent, whatever." So that was nice.
okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I've been like traditionally published here and there with little like stories or poems or
Okay,
things of that nature. But then when I started to look for an agent, what I saw a lot of was like, we want non-white, non-Western, non-straight um, authors, right? I can't do much about my immutable characteristics. and also stories, which, I mean, I suppose you could play to that if you wanted to,
Where the
but
main
again,
characters are also
right,
gay
and
werewolf. That's
so when I saw that, and I saw that that's what agents were doing, like I get web page after web
when
page,
is
that's
this?
what they
What
were
year?
looking.
Because obviously, yeah, part of the thing, some of the posts that I see are these weird changes that, like I said, I was more. I admit, I'd say I was probably more opposed. I've traditionally been liberal, and I just see some of the things that I might have ushered back in the '90s in. I would have been for. If looking back, I was like, oh shit, what did I do? What was I helping? What was I helping? So yeah, so what time period was that going on? I didn't realize, like,
I started looking at that around 2009 or
okay,
so,
okay,
2009, 2010. Occupy was starting
okay,
around then, you know, the Occupy Wall Street thing after
yeah,
the
yeah,
crash.
yeah,
Um, and but what I noticed was just that they weren't looking for me. They weren't
yeah,
interested in what in just because of, you know, because of this
yeah,
or because of a man or because whatever. And to your point, I don't think it makes you not a liberal, right? Because I think the liberal way to look at that, the classically liberal way to look at that would be your skin tone is not what's important. Who you are as a person is what's
sure, yeah,
important,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Um, and then that, you know, there's some hostility in the current thought of the left about that idea, but that's a liberal idea. That was something
yeah,
that probably would have agreed on in the 90s.
sure, yeah,
And um, so when I saw that, I just started investigating self-publishing because it wasn't important to me to be famous, and I'm not big into the marketing thing. Like I don't need any of that. I'm happy to be relatively anonymous. Um, I didn't want to tell stories. I'm just a storyteller. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
and I just want to tell stories. And if it's a small audience and it never gets any big fanfare and it doesn't bring in a ton of money, I'm fine with that. I don't need it. You know, it's not about that. You know, money's nice, of course, but you know, if you're an artist, you want to make art. And
yeah,
ideally you want to put that art in front of people who can respond to it.
yeah,
So that's what I did, like in terms of, so I wrote 2 books of poetry that I self-published and one of short fiction, just collection of short stories, as an undergrad, which don't even feel like mine anymore, right? Because I'm so not that writer
yeah,
anymore.
yeah, yeah.
But then more recently, I published a novel and then another, excuse me, and the third is in some stage of production.
So still self-publishing. Did
Yeah,
you, or you do it like ebooks on Amazon or something?
yeah,
Okay,
that's
yeah,
right.
yeah. So I want to look into that. I just, that's kind of, yeah, I want to do something. I mean, yeah, I think that's, you got it right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah. No, it's, I haven't even looked into it enough, but yeah, when I started looking, it seems like, yeah, having an agent. I mean, yeah, that's nice, but it does seem like they take a little part of it, even if not just that, just they might, oh yeah, they'll want to change something, or
Well,
and
the great
it's
thing
not
about
yours anymore,
having an agent, if you can have one, is that um,
or even a
if you're going to
publisher, right?
self if you're going to self-publish and you want to be big, you have 2 full-time jobs, and one of them is writing and one of them is marketing.
Okay.
And if you're a brilliant marketer, you don't necessarily even need to be a great writer. You can be a workman-like writer, but if you're a good
Sure.
marketer, you know, and you figure out how to work the algorithm and you can kind of get this groundswell of support to where you get picked up and you go viral, then, you know, that's great. I'm not all that interested in marketing. That's not my thing, you know. I'm interested in telling stories. So if you have an agent, you know, they can do a lot of stuff for you, or they call up, oh, you know, I know who wants something like this because they know the people at all the publishing
Sure.
houses. This will match with that. They'll do it. I have relationships, and they can farm it out and, you know, find who in the publishing world wants this and what deal will they make. And yeah, they take a cut, I don't know, 10%,
Yeah.
sometimes more. And that's, you know, that's wonderful if you can get it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, no white people or males have gotten agents in the last 10 or 15 years. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying I took a look around and I went, oh, well, that the people I'm looking at aren't looking for me. So I guess I'll just put it out there and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. No, it's fine. I did notice that in 2000, just applying for scholarships, it was like that. I mean, that's one of the main reasons. So I went to junior college first after, and plus I wanted to wrestle, and it was kind of easier. It was a nice little team. But like, I applied for all these scholarships, and I remember the scholarship ceremony. It was clear why I wasn't getting them. I mean, I had the 4.1 or whatever, and then and did the sports, and it's like I've got all these extracurricular activity things, and I'm just like just looking and watching. Okay, oh yeah, okay, they got a scholarship. Okay, I see. Okay, full ride to UC Berkeley. Okay, well, I can see why. Um, so I've noticed those kind of things too, building up, yeah, through the years for sure. But wait, actually, okay, I'll give you a little link to one of your books. Tell me a little bit about a werewolf. What makes your werewolf story? You have two stories that are sequel or prequel, sequel, or they're unrelated.
So there are two novels.
Just tell us a little bit about them.
Sure. So the first novel is called The Diana Strain, and the idea is that, as you probably know, Highway 1 down around Big Sur, right on the coast in Monterey County, the Highway 1 sometimes goes out because there's a landslide or something like that.
Sure, yeah.
So I was working in Carmel at this kind of swank hotel at one point when this wild storm comes out of nowhere in the summertime, and it forks lightning down on these grasslands and these hills above Highway 1, and they burn away all the vegetation, right, that summer. So when the winter comes and it rains, all that there's no root system to anchor any of that, and there are just these massive mudslides that knock down parts of Highway 1. And this happens every couple of years with some regularity. Some part of the highway goes out because the cliffs always cave in a little bit because there's some ocean down there. And I thought, what would happen if Big Sur got cut off north and south, right? The highway went out. What if it was around the full moon? And what if there started to be murders? Because almost all werewolf stories are really like a whodunit. Who's the real werewolf? We don't know, right? Figure that out.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a game like that called One Night Ultimate Werewolf, where you sit around a table and try to figure out which one is, got the werewolf card.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. It's this whodunit. And it's also my idea is kind of this haunted house idea, except instead of just the one haunted house, it's the whole of this incredible landscape, right, of Big Sur, which, by the way, is some pretty badass bush in some places, right? It's like there
looks alien.
Teams that go, there are teams that go up there to train mountaineering and stuff like that do like special operations type work. Like it's tough country places.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, what would happen? And that was my way into that story.
Okay.
The second book asks another question, and the second question is, what would happen if the government came into possession of a dead werewolf specimen? Like they have a body on ice. What would they do with it?
Okay.
And my answer is, well, they try to weaponize it. They try to turn it into a weapon.
Okay.
The second book is that story, right?
Yeah.
Of how that ends up getting weaponized, what that looks like. And there's sort of a spiritual component to that in some ways as well. And the third book is, okay, what happens, the one I'm writing now is, what happens when like the G7, like the 7 most powerful governments on earth, all have that technology? What do they start doing with it? So that's where we are. And I suppose what sets it apart is if you see things like Teen Wolf or other, things in that genre, it's almost like werewolfism or vampirism in some cases. It's like an alternative lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's something that you can sort of manage, you can live with.
Yeah.
And they're just people with differences like you and me, like this multicultural, we can
Yeah.
all just get along. And my take on it is more like, no, it's a curse. It's a curse. And it's unreasonable and it can't be bargained with. And it's a terrible thing to have to deal with. And it's tragic, like the Wolfman is tragic. Larry Talbot is a tragic figure because of this curse.
Yeah.
And to me, that seems a lot more true to life because, as you know, life is pretty unreasonable at times.
Sure.
And, one day you get a call and somebody that you love with all your heart is gone. Or, your favorite English teacher is just gone because the cancer just took him, right?
Mhm.
From high school, our favorite teacher, right?
Yeah.
Just took him.
Yeah.
Who was this man who was so full of life and had so much beauty in him, just taken.
Yeah.
It can't be bargained with, it can't be reasoned with, you can't figure out, how to negotiate with the curse. It just arrives. You get the phone call on Thursday that you're sick and you don't have so long, maybe, or God forbid some, your kid or something, right? But these things happen. They happen every day. It lands on somebody every day. And so I thought, well, this is that situation, right? Where this is a real, honest to God curse, and you feel bad for the people who are afflicted with it, but at the same time, it has to be stopped, right? So that's where my take differs from some of the more modern werewolf type stories are.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. So you were able to take, I mean, I wonder if your time serving and overseas and stuff, you got ideas from that I mean, they unleashed the werewolf as a international weapon or domestic.
Yeah, so I think in the third book, I think I can see a lot of special operations applications for stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I can also see situations where if you want to do asymmetrical warfare and you want to terrorize a population, you can drop in things like that and suddenly that'll do quite a bit for destabilization.
Yeah.
And paranoia and fear and all the things you want to gen up in for strategic reasons.
Yeah. All right. Nice. And then so yeah, another thing that's interesting, yeah, it's, I mean, yeah, like I said, it's not like we talk often, but I feel there's still these certain posts or something, I catch something, it kind of intrigues me, and so I think about you sometimes and think about, yeah, like I mentioned, I became an English teacher, different kind of English teacher, because wasn't focused on literature as much. I'm teaching English as a second language overseas. I started out actually just teaching at an elementary school with very little. I had my bachelor's degree in philosophy, and then I just did this 1-month course to teach English basically, and it's pretty easy, and it's a high turnover rate. A lot of people in Thailand are teaching just for the visa or a little bit of spending money, and they're not looking to be long term, and neither was I really. But then I fell in love with it, and I was like, actually, this is what I enjoy, and so I continued with my master's, but it was focused on teaching English as a second language, so not like literature based, like deep into English, but I really enjoy it. And then I did start teaching at the university, so a little higher level, obviously, but not, I wouldn't say it's quite like your classes, but I'm interested in, what kind of teacher. I can totally picture you as that's what I said. I remember asking you on one post, like, yeah, what are you doing? And it was, I was kind of surprised because I remember seeing you in military uniform picture or something, and then I had no idea you were teaching English, but I'm like, oh, well, yeah, that makes perfect sense, especially because that's one of my main memories of you was in that English class. And so tell me about your like, yeah, what are your classes like? How do you interact with your students, and how do your students like you? I picture you being kind of tough, but like, but recognizing talent and maybe giving, I don't know, yeah.
Sure. So I think when I started, when I thought, oh, I'll teach, and I'll teach these books and poems and you do that because you fall in love with the beauty of the literature, the poetry, or the short story, or the novel, or whatever it might be. And every English teacher, probably every teacher, has their favorite thing that they think is so beautiful and they want to share, they want to impart to their students.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, it'll be this meeting of the minds. It'll be so cerebral, right? It's sort of this salon of the mind, I thought. Which now I think, well, that's a very nice sentiment, but actually, a great deal of what you do when you teach is as much with your heart as it is with your head. And your heart can certainly take a beating in the job, especially if you're passionate about the subject and you care about the people in front of you, which you come to do, of course. And so my approach has been, well, there was a great critic and thinker and writer and teacher named George Steiner. And George Steiner famously said, I mean, what you carry with you, the bastards can't touch, right? That what you have in your inner shelves,
Yeah.
when you inside of you have the lifeblood of the master spirits, according to what Milton would call it, right? That, even in cases, and he would give an example of, say, like a rabbi, Polish Jewish rabbi in Birkenau, in one of the camps, who had the 5 books of Moses, the Midrash, the Mishnah. He just had them with him. Mm-hmm. And so he would say, open the book of myself. And if don't worry, you've lost all books, come and look it up in me. And this is an interview Steiner gives. He talks about this. Or the idea that in the Bible, Ezekiel, the prophet, takes a, dictation from God. God gives him the word and he writes it in the scroll, and then God says, eat the scroll. Not metaphorically, like eat it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the idea is that this becomes part of you, right? You ingest it, it becomes part of who you are, part of the fiber of what makes you, you. And that those things cannot be taken. That rabbi in the camp, he can be killed, but what he has cannot be taken from him, really, right? And so this is my approach to education: is these skills and these habits of mind that are built by the clear writing of words and sentences and paragraphs and essays. That clear writing is clear thinking. And so as much as it's a writing class, it's a thinking class. And as much as it's a thinking class, it's about all of the impediments to our clear thinking, all of our cognitive biases, all of the logical fallacies and cliches and weasel words, and all the rest of it that we're constantly being bombarded with, and that we in fact will generate in our own writing, and then have to revise and cut that stuff out so that you can think as clearly as you can. And what an essay is essentially is taking the reader and showing them the contour of your thought about a given thing, right? Yeah. And that if you can do that, you are much, much harder to fool. You develop what Hemingway would call like a shock-proof bullshit detector.
Yeah, yeah.
And that wherever you go, whatever you do, if you continue in academia or you don't, it doesn't matter. Here are some things that I can offer you that you can take with you on your journey, that you might need later, maybe against the day when you really need it when troubles come. So one example I give is Cervantes, who wrote Don Quixote. He was an old man. He was at the Battle of Lepanto, which was like the biggest naval battle probably there had ever been up to that point between Christian Europe and the Muslim East. And Christians won, and he's on his way back, and he gets waylaid by pirates, and he ends up in an Algerian jail at like 65 with one hand because he lost one. And this dude writes the first part of Don Quixote. The second one he writes later and for other reasons, but this is, you know, one of the most inspired pieces of genius ever written. And why? He didn't have a phone, he didn't have a library. You know, he just had the books in his head. And it's a book about books, right? Because Don Quixote is a guy who reads so many books about knights errant and romantic courtesy and chivalry and all the rest of it, that he thinks that's what he is. And it's one of the most beautiful and funniest and saddest books ever written. And this guy had it in him to write. It was all on the shelf of his insides, right? The furniture of his mind. And so what I tell students is, your goal might just be a grade. You had to take this class, you're here for a grade, you have other things in mind you want to do. Maybe you don't love English, that's okay. This is a furniture sale. Come and take some of this furniture if you want it, and put it inside of you and carry it with you against the day when you're in an Algerian prison or, you know, whatever life's version of that shadowy place is for you. Your education, what you're carrying with you will be what you have against the day that might ruin you or destroy you or break your heart. And so that's my approach to teaching. That's what I think we're doing here.
And because you mentioned you didn't care for high school, and you don't like the institutionalized. So it's funny to hear, you don't like that, but here you're part of it. So obviously you don't want to give that, you're trying to break that for them, or trying to make it a more comfortable place for the students who are like-minded, or at least like-minded to who you were. And do you see yourself in the students sometimes and try to meet them on that level? Or
so there was a guy I really liked named Neil Postman who wrote a book called, he's since passed on, but he wrote a book called Teaching as a Subversive Activity. And so if you build critical thinkers, if you can give people that tool set and they accept it and they take it on, whatever institution they go to, they're going to inject some kind of sense. But nobody likes a critical thinker. Your boss is not interested in you being a critical thinker. They just want you to do the job. Your colleagues probably aren't, because right, they're not interested in that. You're sort of a pain in the ass if you think for yourself, right? And so to the extent that I'm helping people to become people who reason toward their own ideas and think their own thoughts and keep their own counsel, it's a little subversive, right? Because you're not just a yes man, you're not just a corporate shill, you're somebody who's thought this through, and you have your own opinion. And it doesn't need to be my opinion. I don't have to agree. I tell students about how Socrates, the father of Western philosophy, said, oh, this writing thing is a bad idea. Don't do this. You're going to lose your memory if you do this. And it's perfectly true. We probably don't remember as much as Socrates could remember because, we write things down. We do cognitive offloading, even to the cloud now. But so that's a thing. And then you can also think about the fact that we only know about Socrates because Plato wrote the Republic and talked about Socrates, but he was his student and he differed with him. He did something different. And then in his Republic, Plato says, we're going to throw out all the poets because the poets don't belong in the polis because they're not concerned with truth. Instead, we're going to have philosophers in charge. Wise philosopher kings, because they're concerned with truth, he says, right? But all the poets have to go. And he has a student called Aristotle. And these are the two poles of Western philosophy, right? You're a Platonist or you're an Aristotelian. And Plato writes a book about how great the poets are called On Poetics, about how to judge that, right?
Yeah.
And Plato goes on to teach Alexander the Great, the warlord who brings basically Greekifies the world. And at one point, Alexander decides that Aristotle has to die, and Aristotle runs for his life. So it's not as if being a teacher means making little people who think just what you think, right?
Yeah.
It's giving them the means to think for themselves and become more completely the person they were meant to be, the person that they decide they are. And so, you know, I'm very much against the lockstep indoctrination. I'm very much against you have to think all of the things I think, or I have to shape you into my own little
Yeah.
whatever. No, I just want to provide you with tools and introduce you to experiences and people and thoughts that you can then do something with toward becoming that person that you need to be against the day when you meet tragedy or catastrophe, as we all will and do and must.
Yeah. How in your time, I mean, in the last 8 years, then how's the landscape? I mean, because you're in, yeah, like you mentioned, I mean, you're in a very, I don't know specifically that, I mean, Bay Area region is kind of like the hub of this, like, I mean, you know, I hate using just terms wokeness or whatever, but these definitely more lockstep views that like you have to think this way, more sort of indoctrination type mentality going on. I imagine you had some conflict at some point, whether from administration or students complaining about something. I mean, I don't know. I'm getting a lot of stuff online. I don't know how much of it is real. You're on the ground there. Is it ridiculous stuff that's going on, or is it overhyped or underhyped?
So there, I'll speak from where I sit, right?
Okay, yeah, yeah.
There are things that people say and do in my department or in other departments I don't agree with, but nobody has come to me and tapped me on the shoulder and said, you have to do this and you can't do that.
Sure.
Thus far, I'm pretty much left alone. If I say we're going to read this, that's what we read.
Okay. That's good.
It's been fairly hands off. It's been fairly like, I know there are people in other departments who are saying and doing things I don't particularly agree with. Students come in with stories sometimes, and that's what they do, but nobody's come to me and said you have to do this or you can't do that. Now I've had students who didn't like something or agree with something that I said, but they don't have to. Liking me is not a requirement of the course.
Sure.
And agreeing with me certainly isn't a requirement of the course. And so if you disagree, you disagree. That's all right. Opinions very often are not permanent, right? So you think something today,
Sure, yeah.
That's fine. And I don't need you to come around and agree with me, but maybe you will, maybe you won't. It's also really, frankly, none of my business. Like my job is to try to teach you a few things, and help you on your journey wherever you're going, right? And so I think it's a little morally presumptuous sometimes to be like, well, our job is to make them think X, right? We're going to destroy racism by our teaching. And it's like, well, first of all, I'm the arbiter of what people are allowed to think. Like I need to go into people's head and pick out the things that we as a body have decided they can't do.
Yeah.
I think racism is gross, but can I enforce that on anybody else's will or thinking? No, I suppose, I could pressure them to say the things I want them to say, but that doesn't make them believe the things I want them to believe. So for the most part, my attitude is, if you have a difference, that's your prerogative. I'm not going to make an issue of it. And, I catch some flack on rate my professors, but I've never had like anybody's heavy hand come down on me. I've had classes that were more or less receptive or more, friendly or unfriendly, but by and large, it hasn't been an issue. Touch wood. Um,
Well, that's good. I think I would say if it were to have been an issue, so yeah, that's kind of. I mean, there's a pendulum that swings back and forth, kind of
right.
and I feel like we've gone far enough on that. That I'd say you're in the clear if now. I think we're coming back. I mean now. So now that's always I've always feel like this. I'm gonna give one example specifically. So I've been a vegetarian since I was 10, and I'm vegan now, and that's always been. I watch that's kind of like my one thing. I look at society, like it'll get popular and then it'll go back and people will hate it. Like it'll and for different reasons. It was sometimes animal rights, now maybe it's environment or something, or it could be for I mean, but it's weird. I've noticed how like it'll become popular, and then the views on that it'll come stark back, and then it's like you have to eat meat or something. So it's like I see it going back and forth, and so now I can feel it. I mean, it's funny to joke about that, like I'm oppressed, but sometimes I can feel like I'm celebrated, and then I'm oppressed just by this. It's just like you can't even put your finger on it. It's just this feeling. So, and I can feel it going back and forth. And that's just one particular view that, since I identify in that regard, I'm able to focus on that. That one's an easy one for me to see when it's swaying back. So I feel like it's swaying back where there was a while, even though in most of my views are not going to be this well, actually I are. I mean, I like the environment and stuff, and so that kind of ties in the reason why, yeah, I kind of wanted to have this podcast was this idea, and part of me, when I did start seeing liberalism like take a nasty dark turn, and I guess it was around the COVID era, even though I was way out here and not really affected by it, because I live far from a city and really in the jungle, and nobody really cares about those things here. But they did in the city and stuff. So it's like I saw so people who I was like-minded with, I was like, whoa, all this stuff's going too far. So now I guess now I already see, okay, I think it went as far as it is going to go this round, and it's going to come back. So I'm a part of my like objective. It's not like I have a voice in the world, like my voice is going to change anything, but I'm like, okay, let's not let it go too far back crazy the other way, because that's all that's going to do is just create the need to swing back the other way. Let's take that last craziness and let's try to let it coax it in slowly, and just let it kind of teeter back and forth. Yeah, and I wouldn't want stagnicity. I mean, it is good to have a sway, but not as far as we just saw. And I think I kind of blame it on the COVID thing, but I don't know. I can't put my finger on exactly what caused it. So so yeah. Well, I'll let you comment on that before, and then kind of lead into that post, which I was focusing on. It is related to that, but I'll stop here first if there's anything to.
Sure. I think you're right that we're looking at a moving target, right? All the time, things are moving, and Marshall McLuhan said I think it was McLuhan said, like, we live our lives in the rearview mirror. You're going to do everything today based on what happened yesterday. And so is almost everybody else all the time, right? So whatever's happening now, we'll find out about, but not today, not outside of our own lives.
Yeah.
There are people who have written memoirs about when countries are taken over by some perverse set of ideas or perverse incentives, things like all of a sudden there's a revolution and then people up against the wall being shot for whatever. And maybe sometimes just no reason. I mean, the Khmer Rouge just, oh, do you know how to read? We'll shoot you. Do you wear glasses? You look like you know how to read. We'll shoot you, right? Those things happen, and so it's tough to know is this a pendulum swing that's going in one direction, or are there bad actors who are trying to incite, right? Are there governments or individuals or corporations or conglomerates that are pulling psyops? Probably. How successful are they? Tough to know, right? At any given time. So, there are people who are trying to push that pendulum in one place or another toward a certain thing, for all kinds of reasons. So it's not really swinging freely, and maybe it never has, but it certainly isn't now. It's being acted upon by people who are intent on trying to influence hearts and minds, mainly with this medium we're working with right here. It's the #1 information delivery service on Earth, and it plays specifically to our most impulsive, emotional, reactive selves.
Yeah.
That's what it's good at. So it makes people perhaps quite malleable as long as they're frightened and angry, which this also does very well, to make people frightened and angry. With that in mind, I hope that calm, reasoned people can come together and find places of common ground and find places where they can respectfully disagree in a way that is productive rather than destructive, right?
Yeah.
That's my take on it.
Yeah, no, I like that kind of, and I forget. So I always get. I mean, I mentioned to you when I was texting back or giving you an audio or video, and Paul Binder to us. I get really into this. Like I said, you are probably able to get in deep discussions being on a campus and stuff with that. There's going to be some people on, and my wife's actually extremely intelligent and deep thinking. So we talk about things, but obviously, and there is a language barrier. She's Thai, but we've been together so long. We've been together now, over 10 years. She knows my English perfectly and stuff. She's not as big of a talker though. Everything she says is profound, but she's very she doesn't always say that many things. So so I don't want to knock on her, but for the most part, that's my one person I have conversation with. So I'm not really in, except for these podcasts, which I've been doing, and I enjoy them, and I'm meeting up with old friends and colleagues, and one just random person from Twitter who, we commented, and I was like, hey, it's so funny though. I say, hey, will you join me on a podcast? And some people get really defensive. Oh, you have a podcast? I'm just like, I actually thought, like, I hate texting back and forth on some forums when there's a deep topic to discuss. And so that's kind of what I want to get into. I think we laid into it a little bit, and it is this for during my life. Let me tell you a little story, and I might have told you this on, I don't know if I did or not. So I grew up in I was actually born in Southern California. I moved to I was in Pennsylvania, like a real small town in the Bergs, growing up in the, like a real conservative little small town. And my parents never talked about God, which is, I mean, you could call us atheist or agnostic, just spiritual or not. It's not like I was ever taught to not believe in God. That concept, I already developed this concept of the universe as everything that exists. And I remember actually going to school one time and somebody talking about God, and everybody, I think, went to a single church or something. We were like the only family that didn't. And then one of the students mentioned the word God, and I asked them what God was, and then they went home. The next day they came back and said, I'm not allowed to play with you. So I guess I always had like this negative connotation, like God is this thing that I don't even understand. And then every time he explained to me, I'm like, that's the universe, right? So I've always had a different goal. So I don't like saying like, oh, I'm atheist, but at the same time, if I say that I'm not atheist, then I feel like I have to believe in this construct that developed somewhere else, and I already kind of developed my own concept that might be referring to the same thing, but it's mine, and that's what I want. And so I know that there are atheists out there who are like materialists, I guess, or where everything's can be reduced to matter. And I've come to my own conclusion that that's actually the one thing that's logically impossible, is that it can be reduced to matter. So in my concept, and I also don't like that, like, I think therefore I am. I have a similar one, but it's more like something exists. That's my base knowledge, is like something exists. That's, if we need some axiom of truth, that I can say, okay, something exists. And the fact that it exists is literally the most mind-blowing thing. I can just sit there and just fucking tweak out on that. I get shivers up my body just thinking something exists is the absolute. And to me, that is more powerful than God. But it probably is when people are able, like, truly, that's that. If I had to define God, I would say that the fact that something exists at all, like because from like a materialist scientific Big Bang doesn't really make sense, because you're still going to need something. They just like to sweep that little speck. Well, no, you don't understand. It's so tiny, though. It's like, well, okay, but that's problematic philosophically. That's problematic. And so I've got this, and I've actually very early on, I don't know if you noticed, I mean, I remember writing about like Buddhism early on. Those were the views that I've been most interested in. But again, I don't want a doctrine dictating what I say. So I'm not Buddhist, I'm not Taoist. Those views have always been more in line. Just like when I read it, it's just it's more comforting than these personifications of God. The Abrahamic religions tend to, I've had a negative view towards them. Even now, I just feel like there are that's not what I believe in. But at the same time, now this is what I'm saying, though, at now, again, whether it's post-pandemic craziness that's going on, and back that pendulum swing, and there's this weird, actually, it's around the coronavirus, and I don't know your view specifically, but I'm, again, a real liberal view, anti-pharmaceutical. I'm against all these things. I believe in natural immunity. Again, for me, it's more of evolution and evolutionary base. I am spiritual, and that I don't believe it's random. That's specifically, it was that randomness that kind of sparked me, because I'm an anti-randomness atheistic in the way that there is no God in my system. It doesn't exist. It's not necessary. We could be in a simulation that was created by something, but still there would be a greater thing that encapsulates all of it, I guess. But because of this, for the first time, through the rearrangement of like ideologies and spots, all of a sudden, bam, I'm like, all of a sudden, and we do get in these echo chambers, and I try to escape them, but online and stuff, I'm all of a sudden, I'm in these echo, when I try to get out of them, but the echo chambers that I'm agreeing with, they're always like, we're like on point on every issue, except for then this necessary that God, it always comes up, and I'm like, wow, it's weird. How did this happen? Now, all of my, from like an ideological perspective, I'm like, I'm in this God camp now. So it's weird. I'm having a hard time. So I guess whether we can define God in a way that everybody's like, okay, that's what it is, but it tends to be difficult, because there are these very specific like things that need to be met. It seems like in Abrahamic religions that I'm unable to identify with. But at the same time, I feel so, yeah. So part of this is like, and you just mentioned it with like these can be destructive sometimes, just social media and in ways that we interact. But I want this conversation to be some sort of like a model for like a way to discuss and I admit in my life, I've always had negative views towards religion and particular Abrahamic religions, and now, so I kind of want to mend that for myself, and recognize like, wow, how much similarities there are, and how much I actually agree with these fundamental truths that you would find in these holy scriptures. even though maybe, maybe it was just written in a way that there's little trivial aspects that I don't identify with, but there's these, wow, this is actually, there's a lot of truth in here that I agree with. So, okay, I'll stop there.
Well, would it be all right if I asked you a few questions?
Sure. Yeah, actually, yeah. Sometimes that's better because I just rambled. Yeah, it's hard to say. So yeah.
Okay. So, do you believe that there's such a thing as evil?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I would say, as like, I I mean, yeah, I believe people can be evil. I mean, but are we like saying like an evil force that could like take over me over, or like an external evilness, or that people can be that?
Let's say that we can go up from there. We don't have to get that granular. We'll just say some things are objectively good and other things are objectively evil. And it wouldn't really matter if everybody in your town or everybody in your state or everybody in your country said this is really good. If it's wrong even if they're mistaken about it. That it's just not right to do. Do you think something like that exists?
Yeah, no, well, that's I'll tell you, that's probably no, and I'm actually glad you asked that question, because that shows that you, in amongst my rambling, that you do understand kind of where I'm at, because I would say most of my life I would have said no. I would have said, and that's kind of like I'm saying, I would have taken a more, like I said, Taoist approach, or relativist approach to that question, because, and also as a philosopher, I feel like I could always come up with some that it's too slippery of a, like, okay, obviously, like, skull fucking a baby in front of its mother or something. It's like, I mean, obviously, okay, but then it's like, what if that was the only way to like save humanity or something? It's like I'd come up with these perverse, just I try on purposely to just come up with the absolute obvious good and bad, and I get in these views of like, well, how can I so this is that is the question. I guess I feel is I'm having the most difficulty with, to tell you the truth, because I feel like there is a real evil for the first time in my life, and that's kind of where I've been. But I don't know where it's coming from. Like I said, is it external? Is it something that can truly take over something? And then so my default position is going to the Tao and looking at it. Okay, there is evil, and then there's this opposite good, but then I have a hard time separating it. I would call myself a non-dualist, and by being a non-dualist, it is hard to separate evil from the whole, I guess. So that's
what you mean by that, just so that everybody.
by
I think I know what
non-dualist.
you mean by non-dualist.
Yeah,
I think I know what you mean, but if we have listeners, they may not necessarily understand what you mean.
sure.
But maybe I don't even know exactly
No,
what
no,
you
that's
mean.
true.
So
No, it isn't. And the funny thing, actually, that one guy I mentioned, that was, he's a philosophy. He's from India, and he was he actually did a thing. He actually kind of helped me with that. So for me, it was actually, it means a lot to different people. For me, I've kind of tended, so like philosophically, a dualist would be that there's matter and there's like mental are separate, like consciousness is not material. Could be that's one aspect, and then so, like, am I a philosophical idealist, where I believe, to me, I look at matter as like it can't, it's hard for okay, if there's matter and there's also consciousness and they're separate, then even okay, on whatever way that they interact with one another, then that's one thing. So it's hard. It's like every time I separate two things, the only way those two things could interact if there was also something that encapsulates it. So I guess that's what I mean by non-dualist. That now that doesn't mean that if one were like if one trumped the other, I would have to say consciousness would be under root, because I don't see how material could be broken down. So for me, non-dualism mainly becomes material and consciousness. That's mainly what I'm focused on. Although, yeah, other people might use different ideas. Like I said, the guy that I had on before, actually, he had a different concept of it, kind of, but it helped me kind of form mine. So yeah, I have a hard time separating things. I have a hard time separating evil from good, because ultimately, just the concept of those two are part of something greater in a way. So and that's, I guess, would be the one thing I again, that's more like Taoist. Can there be a God and a devil? For me, I still think there's something greater than that, and it's everything. And so I guess there's always everything. Anytime I separate something into two parts, I they're just like sucked back together by something that makes it. And unfortunately, that is this relativism, and it is problematic. I see, if you take that too far, that we can end up in these situations that we're in right now. So yeah, go.
Yeah, I think there's a book, an interesting book that you might want to work through, called "Do You Think What You Think You Think?" And the name of the author escapes me, but you go through various exercises like this to try and figure out how to get all of your maybe disparate ideas and beliefs to hang together. So one of the questions that it asks is, do you believe in evil? Do you believe in the existence of evil? And or another way to ask that is there an objective right and wrong? Another way to ask that might be, is there such a thing as a moral universal law?
Yeah.
Is it better, as Andrew Clavin would say, to give a beggar bread than it is to kick a baby? Right? Clearly,
yeah,
to my way of thinking, and I think to your way of thinking, it's better to give a beggar bread. And it doesn't matter what your culture says about that.
Yeah.
It's just objectively better to do. And if that's the case, then you're not a relativist. You can't be. If you say some things are better than others, then you believe there's a hierarchy. And so, not to go all Jordan Peterson on you, but there's got to be something at the top of the hierarchy to aim at. And you could call that God. You seem to call that the universe, maybe. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but that's maybe part of what I'm hearing, is that your conception of the highest good would be something like the universe, and the concomitant shadow of that good is evil. The antithesis, the opposite. And so dualism, the way I hear it, is something like, well, you can't have good without evil, because they're definitive categories of each other. They're binary. It's a 0 or 1. And so it's a clarifying thing to know, okay, there's an objective moral law. Better to give the beggar bread than to kick a child. So then the next question is, who established, or what established, a universal moral law? And so, is there a lawgiver? If it's random, how could there be a law? And you could say, well, it's evolutionary. Maybe, yeah. You could think about the 10 Commandments as, how do you get a cohesive tribe that gets along socially? Don't steal each other's stuff. Agree about, because if you say, God is that highest good in the hierarchy. We're all oriented toward that same thing. We're not aiming at different things. We're all aiming at the same thing. We're not going to steal each other's stuff. We're not going to sleep with each other's wives, right? This is the way that we're going to have a cohesive society. It checks that box. But again, if there's a law, an objective moral law that we agree on, that question of who wrote that law, I think that's a big and important question. And some of my trouble with the Eastern religions has to do with the idea that that can be sort of waved away with, well, it's an illusion. It's all an illusion. As opposed to saying, no, there, as you say, there is something. Something exists. And then maybe we're seekers trying to find out what that is. The Abrahamic religions give their answers, certainly. But I think the crisis of the current moment is, it seems to me, people who are sort of denying that any kind of evil really exists. It's all culturally determined. It's all socially constructed. One man's ceiling's another man's floor. It's all the same sort of, it's just all about point of view. And while there is some truth to that, point of view is important, subjectivity is important, throwing objective moral reality out the window, I think, leads to madness. It leads to the kind of madness that you could find yourself, marching on the side of people who murder civilians in the most cruel possible ways. Some cultures, I think we should argue, are better than others, objectively better. So the Canaanite culture that put babies into fires to sacrifice to Moloch is a worse than a culture that cherishes and loves its children. And for whatever reason, that's become controversial.
Yeah.
Anyway, you're free to respond to that.
No. That's, I mean, those are the types of things that have those are, I mean, what you're saying now is what makes me real, and it's happened over time that I recognize this. I mean, from a philosophical standpoint, I still see our realm that we've really, it's small time period of development that we've come about, and there are other life forms that are going to it's hard to see, I guess it's more of a possible universes too. So I battle with what we are. So even if we are, and I always put it in a simulation model, and there is an absolute creator. I mean, if we were created with intent, but a conscious creator, then there's still at least the potential for these other realms. So I agree with just about on a cultural and society level, I think 100%. And that's actually where I find myself now when I'm online most of the time, is that I do agree with these. But at the same time, from a spiritual perspective, it still seems so small in the complexity of the universe that here now we do have these. I mean, it's so my consciousness is so important to me now, but where does it go? So that's the next thing. Is I don't particularly, I kind of tend to see some sort of form of reincarnation, but I don't think my actual consciousness is going to. exists. I just think somehow wherever and this will actually, one final question I will eventually want to ask is about death, because that's kind of what my focus has been on. But to me, that, I mean, that's actually my right now, my main focus is I want to create the perfect death. How I want to know how I leave. And I don't think that it's just internal blackness, which I think a lot of people would presume that an atheist is going to think that. But again, from Eastern religions do usually have some form of reincarnation or something that's going to, there is purpose or meaning in the way we die in some form. And I want that final conscious thoughts to be ones without regret or resentment. I want it to be in the most, peaceful state. So I have these definitely absolute ideas. There's no relativism there. There's a peak state of consciousness that I want to be at when I die. But when we go to like arranging society, it is hard to think like, yeah, how can we, I don't know. Yeah, is there something yeah.
Okay, so like you, I think when we were in high school and we were sort of McKinnon's acolytes, I think we thought a lot of the ways that he thought. I think he was a pretty big influence on us, and he was big hippie, dope smoking, lib kind of guy.
Yeah, he was honest about it. I remember first day of school.
He was very honest about it.
That's surprised you can get away with that in high school too. He's just like,
but for me, it's like, I've come away from a lot of those ideas politically and socially, much more. And I suppose, that's a normal trajectory. You get more conservative maybe as you get older.
Yeah.
But also, life experiences and life lessons and being exposed to ideas that I think are in many cases just more plausible. That's been my journey, and it's brought me to a faith where I didn't really have one. And it's, I think I'm a Christian, I'm a Messianic Jew, right? Ethnically Jewish. I think Jesus was the Messiah the Jews were waiting for, is the Messiah the Jews are waiting for. But, I came to that by degrees and fits and starts. I was always a seeker. I read everything I could get my hands on. I asked about, if I ran into people of the cloth or people who are willing to talk about their faith, I would ask about it. I read Taoism. I read about Buddhism. I read quite a bit. I think Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse is one of the really great books. It's
that in high school. I remember there was some
academic.
We must have been in that same club then.
Yeah.
That was actually did kind of set me. I was interested in Buddha, but I was more Japanese because of the martial arts and stuff. I was more into Zen, and it wasn't until that book that I read that actually kind of got me, and probably why I'm in Thailand right now. Like, in a lot of ways, yeah. So huge influence. So, yeah, it's incredible.
So, but I think like, I came to this place by many questions and many conversations, and I would expect, almost nobody comes to where they are in one instant. Most of the time you move by degrees. So for me, it's like, okay, if there's an objective moral law, then must be an objective moral lawgiver who presides over the thing and isn't of it, but is the creator of it. Isn't bound by it, but has created the boundaries, right?
Okay.
That's part of it for me. But then what I would throw over to you is like, people talk about miracles, right? You read about miracles in the Bible, and I think those are possible and plausible. But the thing that really blows me away, and I think about this often, is just the deep complexity of creation, the deep complexity of everything around us. And even the very smallest things that we can see, we don't really understand atoms. We kind of do, but we don't. And almost everything. You can get more and more granular and focus in more and more, but you could go out and out and out and out.
Yeah.
And it's so multivariate, it's so vast, it's so incredibly complex that um I I would just think like I said in my post, if you came upon a meal in the forest, with candles and it had all been cooked and wine and everything's there, and you wouldn't ever go, well, that's totally random. Nobody cooked that. Nobody put it here.
Yeah.
What amazes me is that there's something instead of nothing. The fact that we're even here in this rude flesh,
Mhm.
is, the more I think about it, the more mind-boggling it is that there should be anything at all, that anything should work
Yeah. No, that
at all.
yeah.
So what do you do with that?
Yeah, no, that's the one thing. That's what I always come to, and it's but I'm still on the illusion of self. To me, that resonates with me, that I'm actually, there is nothing that I inherently am able to identify as core me, and that part makes it like, still I'm able to just, that the fact that anything existed at all is literally just incomprehensible, and I'm able to just, like, that I really can't build off of that. There's nothing that can really, I can just, I have to just kind of bury that in, if I ever want to function in the world on any level, you know what I mean? That, because that part just under it changes everything, every law that I think I know. So that's kind of the problem sometimes, is that I mean, I can't, it's not like I actually believe we're in a simulation, but when I start thinking about, like, the way you talk about, like, creationism and moral codes and stuff, I feel like, I still feel like, yeah, but again, it is like a test in a way. I mean, there are some aspects that I resonate with, like I do believe in some form there is judge. I mean, I believe we should judge ourselves. Like, there's a poem, maybe the Man in the Mirror or something, like I mean, though, like, at the end of the day, yeah, on that final moment when I die, and I believe that death is going to be a conscious, I'm going to consciously leave and know, and I don't know where, if that consciousness ends completely or somehow it's able to transcend into something else. But I believe at that moment there's like real judgment, and it's, I don't look at it as an external judgment. I look at it as just like, there's no bullshit at that point, like, and I'll be able to, I want to be able to say I don't resent anything. I'm not attached to anything that I'm leaving behind, and I don't have any regrets, which of course, I'm sure I at least want to come to, at least accept or whatever regrets as, or I want to have some equanimity at that moment, and I think that's kind of what I'm striving to have, but then it does go back to, then this experience is actually much, it's not necessarily the nature of reality, or it's not necessarily, I do believe in absolute truth, but I don't know that we have access to it. We have glimpses of it. We might in some form, but in this realm, whatever it is, it's kind of just a glimpse of these things, and in some ways, yeah, like these objective, I like to just say objective truth. More, I believe in objective truth. Like, I believe in absolute truth. Absolute truth. It is still hard to like, the morality things are like, from a concept. I almost feel like, I mean, sometimes it's mind-boggling to think, like, if it's possible, like, we could actually, every sentient being that is here, we're going to come back and re-experience it as them too. So whatever we do, we're going to experience all sides of it. In some way I do. So I am more karmic in this sense that, so whether there are things that we can say are, it's easy for me to say that there's obviously, yeah, kicking a baby in the face is just objectively wrong, right? But the reasons why we shouldn't do it is because we're doing it to ourselves, and like we're on both sides of it. So there's still this like, that whatever evil there is, whatever evil that you're a part of, or whatever negative, like you are doing it to yourself. So it's like, so it takes that. I mean, and unfortunately, this is the problem, because it does take some sort of responsibility out of things, and that's the dangerous. And I don't want to do that. And that is the difficulty that I'm at right now, is because I do want people to be held accountable for horrific actions, and but in a sense, is it our place to do it? And this is where I actually am like, wow, you know, it starts talking about, I almost feel like I'm describing this God. I just don't see it as this God is going to judge us. I feel that we are in a system that, you know, these actions are going to have you know, whatever people do, there's going to be you know, cause and reaction from those, and we're gonna feel it. So in some ways, so I guess it kind of gets back into the, right, it doesn't get back, we didn't really touch on, but it's like, okay, so if there are objective moral stances, yeah, what do we do with evil people? So okay, yeah, let me just finish that. What do we do with evilness? What do we do with it?
Right. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that the highest good, right, everything that is good, that is desirable, that is to be wished, that is true, that is factually true, or that is, you know, true in the capital T sense, all of it, right, proceeds from what we'll call, you know, God. Let's call it that.
Sure. Yeah, no, yeah, that's fine.
And so I think therein lies this question of free will. You can choose God or not God. You can do the things you know to be right. You can do the things that you know to be wrong. You have that option. And that obviously you draw closer to that God the more you try to do the good as you see it, and draw away from the evil as you know it, right? And so the other thing I wanted to touch on is sort of this idea that you had, that on one level we do to ourselves the evil we do to another, right? And that's a reason not to do it. And I would say my reaction to that was to ask you about what is the nature of love? Because probably there's a place for self-love and treating yourself well. But when I think about, you know, not hurting a child, some of it, I suppose, has to do with how that would make me feel about myself, or what that would make me feel about who I am, right? That would be, I suppose, guilt. But also, there's some recognition that that other person has feelings just like I do. And on some level, like I want to give them love. And by love, I don't mean the emotional feeling that we have, like infatuation or desire. I mean like genuinely wishing the good of the other, and trying to bring that about as you understand it, right? I want that child to be fed and to be raised and to be treated with the respect that they deserve, not because of what it will do to me or for me, although that's in there, but because something in my heart says this is the best thing you could do, as opposed to the worst thing you could do. And the best thing that I think I can do is going to draw me closer to that thing we're calling God, right? And so that's, you said we're going to move on to death, maybe the good bridge between the eternal and the eternal question is this bridge love? Is it, you know, is there a metaphysical quality to that in your understanding of things?
Yeah, no, I mean, love is we, and I talk with one of I have a regular guy that I talk with on these podcasts that I, another English teacher, actually, I met him here, and we talk about that sometimes, and it's from there is, but we talk about this on like an evolutionary aspect, and to me evolution is this like force there. To me evolution is not necessarily as I don't like the sign. There are sign, you can explain it in scientifically, but it's in a sense, yeah, love is like actually from an emotional standpoint, there's love, and then I'm still kind of, this is how he explained it, but I'm kind of, it's kind of sinking in with me, and then there's fear. So there's like, when we have the fear, then we're not able to feel that love, but like this hard to explain. I'm talking about this. Wait, what was your question exactly? The bridge. Wait, did you have a specific question? I'm just kind of about what was your about metaphysical bridge, right, between.
I probably didn't put it as clearly as I should have. Let me think about how I want to say this. I think what I want to say is something like, you suggested that there's a karmic reason not to harm somebody, right? Because on some level you have a connection, and what you mete out will be meted out to you, perhaps. And so in self-interest on some level, but also in recognition of yourself in the other,
Yeah,
you don't do it, right?
Yeah.
And my question is, because that there are a lot of I's and me's in that idea.
Yeah.
And what is the place of love in why we don't do bad things to other people? And is there a, not just a utilitarian, but a metaphysical aspect to that love?
Okay. I mean, okay, so yeah, from, yeah, in a sense, I mean, by metaphysical, like nature of what is, or like
physical.
Yeah, yeah, well, yeah, to me everything is actually ultimately not physical. So like the nature, I would consider that the nature of reality almost. So to an extent, love is, I mean, that's one, I try to think about it. So I am, like I said, non-dualist, I'm non-materialist. I tend to think of myself, just because the only two things I can think of are material and consciousness, or like if everything can't be reducible to matter, what it has to be, like I don't understand the, like how time and space and basically matter is time and space. It's in these things. So there has to be something underlying those things. And it's either consciousness, seems like a viable concept. It doesn't, consciousness could exist without time and space. And then, but then the other one is love. So to some extent, to answer that, if it is answering your question, that love would be the like nature of reality, almost like that is what is. So metaphysically, that is the construct that everything is built on. I don't necessarily believe that, but it is one of the one of the things when I try to conceptualize what this thing that, yeah, we're saying something exists. If something exists, it could just be that is love. I mean, love could be the answer, basically. Yeah, it's something that I've considered as it's not consciousness. Like consciousness is something else. Consciousness also might be fundamentally underscored by something, and that could be love. It might be something else. So yeah, no, I think love is and if that's the case, then yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, I don't know. No, that's a hard thing, but I do think about it. It's not yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that the thing maybe that maintains the universe or creation, if you want to call it that or whatever, might be the spiritual or consciousness force of that we call love, right? The concept of love might be the thing that undergirds the universe on some level. Well, then there's not a lot of daylight between you and me, because that's essentially what I think many Christians and Jews basically believe, that God is fundamentally, that this act of creation, this act of making all of these things, the unfolding of this creation by the creator, by the lawgiver, is rooted in and substantially based out of love. Right? The Bible says you're fearfully and wonderfully made. And so if that's the case, then I think you're right. We don't dissolve into nothingness and darkness when we die, because as you say, we're not just material, right? That there's something of spirit about us, or of consciousness, if you prefer that. And that if the source and font of all creation, including ourselves, is love, then if we have chosen love, if we've chosen the highest good as we understand it, and if we have tried to orient ourselves toward that, then probably we'll go toward that beyond, this, when the body stops working. And if we've oriented ourselves away from that, then ultimately that's the direction of travel when the life ends. But and what I'm saying is, like, down the middle Christianity, I know. So what is your thought about that?
Yeah, no, see, yeah, that, I mean, and these are those are ideas are I mean, that resonates with me. I guess the thing that doesn't, and I might be wrong about it, again, it stems back, and we have to I mean, just that, my little anecdote from when I was a kid, my first introduction to the word of God, and that's completely poor on my part to blame it on that. But I guess I have this notion, and it may or may not be true, because I admit I haven't read the Bible or Old Testament, New Testament, or Quran or anything, but from my understanding, and it easily could be wrong, and again, I know it's could easily been changed, but I can't help but feel this idea that, like, I have to accept this, or I'm in some cases it could be violent. You could be killed for not believing this certain thing, and I feel that we are able to attain that without that book, like without it being told to us that, and in fact, we might not even be able to reach that state unless we find it on our own, and we find it in our own way. So in a way, yeah, okay, so let's say I am able to, and without, I feel like I could be, I don't know what's the blasphemy or heretic or something, like if I were to claim that I am able to reach the same fundamental principles that are taught in these religions, that I would be killed by some or ostracized, or I don't have that option to come to. I guess that's where I still have this I mean, negativity and fear. I honestly, I mean, we see it of that like that. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I get that. I hear that. That makes sense to me. It's coercion. It's compulsion. And it's based in some other incentive than wanting to better understand the nature of the universe and your place in it, or who created you and for what, right? All of a sudden there's all this noise in the signal because people are messy, and they do silly things like tell their children don't play with that little atheist child, which is gross.
Yeah.
To my way of thinking anyway. Certainly nothing I would tell my children. I tell my children that we're going to treat everybody with respect and kindness, even if we don't agree with them, even if we don't think the same things. That's not the condition for entry, as you agree with me. You take people where they are, as they are, and you try to treat them with as much respect and courtesy as you can. That makes sense. So I'm sorry that happened, and I'm sorry that it colored some of the way you see it. But I also think that, like, I can't speak for whole religions or anything like that, but I've often asked myself, okay, what if somebody were born on a remote island, right? And maybe it's just like mom, dad, and kid, right? And the kid's born and lives and dies on this little island and never meets anybody else. And there's no book, there's no missionary, there's no nothing. Probably there'll still be an urge toward religion. That seems to be something that we all have. But, like, if that kid never even learns Jesus of Nazareth existed, does that mean this kid is beyond forgiveness for sin or anything like that? And my answer is no, because what Jesus actually says is, no one comes to the Father except through me. But that doesn't just mean like you have to hear about me in a certain way from a certain victor. You have to say the certain words, because we're talking about presumably the God who made everything and knows everything about everyone and isn't surprised by anything ever. So could he affect that salvation? Because remember, the idea is the incarnation itself might be the initiation of matter at all. Here's what I mean by that. I'm sure that Christians believe that there's a triune God, right? There's a Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, right? But that they are
I never got that. I've heard that before. What is the Holy Ghost? I mean, that's God and Jesus are one, and what's the Holy Ghost?
And the Holy Spirit is so this is actually, like, theologians go to the mattresses about this, right? But I would say a prevailing idea is that the Holy Spirit is a person of God that is created by the love, by the relationship of the Father and the Son, right? And that therefore, God it's three persons in one God. Without getting into the Trinity too much, the idea was, I asked myself, like, okay, because they're supposed to be co-equal, and because none predates the other, because God creates time, it's a creation of God. God exists outside of time, but can enter into it, and did enter into it in the Christian view. But okay, what does Father mean, and what does Son mean, if there isn't one generating the other, that they both existed since before creation at the same time for all eternity? What does that mean? I asked myself, and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and this is the best thing I can come up with. And some of this, I'll say, like, Jordan Peterson had good things to say and helped me think about this in a certain way, but it was like, the father is the one whose tradition and will you carry out in the world if you are the son. So the father is the tradition, the ethos, the lawgiver, right? And the son is the one who takes his father's tradition, and doesn't have to be, generational, but goes into the world and does the will of the father, furthers the tradition. But the tradition, of course, can only be carried forward into a present that is constantly changing. So it constantly needs to be readapted to the present. It can't live only in the past. It has to be readapted to the present as conditions change in the real world in real time, right? And so those became my working definitions of like father and son in this case, to make it make sense in my brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we do things in the world, and those things have an effect. And like Bob Dylan said, you got to serve somebody. And, it's either to the good or, the opposite. So that's sort of how I think about it in terms of reality exists, incarnation exists because Christ came, like the world was made so Christ could enter into it for the salvation and for the love of the people, right? In my estimation of these things. And so if you have a body, if you do things in the world, if you are a created being, then Christ has something to do with it, because God has something to do with it, and God is a spirit, but Christ is a man with a body who entered into creation, right? If that's what you believe, as I do. But the point is, you're incarnate because he is incarnate into flesh.
Okay.
That's sort of my understanding. Okay, and so back to the kid on the island.
Yeah.
Can God have a relationship with that kid without the benefit of a book? Of course he can. He's God. Of course he can.
Yeah.
And does he love the kid more or less if the kid reads the Bible or not? No, I don't think so. I do think, Christ is necessary in that operation, but I kept asking myself, well, what is a Christian? What do we all have to agree on in order for that to even count as a category? Ontologically, what is the essential thing you need to be in order to call yourself a Christian? What do you have to know? If you've only ever just heard the name, or if you got your name signed on the rolls and you got baptized when you were a baby, are you really a Christian? Is that what that means? And the best thing I could figure out was that a Christian is someone who Christ chooses. It's not actually the other way around. And there might be secret Christians that Christ has chosen that nobody at any church knows about, that, they have this relationship. I think that was the best I could come up with, because the more you get into a religion, you find all the fissures where people agree and disagree of the interpretation of this thing and that thing, and that's fine. But like, I was looking for bedrock, and the best thing I can say is that we're the object that is acted upon by the divine. We're not the subject who gets to, decide we're going to address ourselves one place or another. And I realize that troubles free will a little bit. But they're in tension. Those two ideas are in some tension together. So I'll just kick it back to you, if you have a response to any of that.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, I'm actually not, yeah, I mean, it's weird. It seems, I mean, that story of the boy that doesn't even have access to Jesus, but even in the case, like, that there is I mean, there's access to different where you're still going to be in a different. It's like it would like is at if we look at the absolute truth or just seeking truth. And one thing that attracted me to Buddhism is that Siddhartha generally wasn't trying to like teach it, and kind of almost to me, I don't know, this is how I felt. It was almost in a smug way sometimes that like he couldn't offer what his understanding. Even though he tried, and he was very logical and able to kind of like write some steps out, but it's kind of more of there's this it's inside of you, you know what I mean? So like by finding, so basically I believe, so I mean, I guess it kind of sounds like you're saying, I mean, it's funny because I don't think, I mean, there is Pascal's wager or something. People ask me like, oh, but that to me, I'm like, that doesn't even, that's you can't fake it. So like you're not going to be able to fake it. So it's like some people, oh, you should just believe it just in case. And when I hear people say that, I'm like, was that why you do?
Never liked that.
Yeah, no, yeah. I believe that you wouldn't, because I mean, so to me, I feel like, I guess it's funny because I want Christians to, this is partly, I mean, why do I care? But it's like, but actually, it's been difficult. Like when I've had Christian girlfriends at times too. It's like I have a hard time to look at somebody that if I'm unable to like specifically say, okay, Jesus came for all these, like we could agree on everything else, but like you think that my soul is going to be like in the eternal depths of hell. It's like it's hard for me to have a relationship with somebody, an intimate relationship with somebody that actually ultimately they see themselves as like that I'm something else, and it shouldn't bother me. In some ways it does, but I like when people talk about the Pascal's wager, I actually say that I do believe if there is some form of judgment, that I'm pretty comfortable. You can, you know, I don't have anything that I'm pretty sure I could put it out on the table on a judgment day and be like, well, cool. I mean, considering everything, like that's how I feel. And it really has nothing to do with accepting Jesus or not. I just feel there's a direct way to it, and in a sense that again, yeah, I mean, I guess it's weird that I mean, there are different time periods as well, not just a remote island, but in these different groups that all that I think anybody would have access to these things. Given their situation, they'd have a different opportunity. So I guess my opportunity, while someone could find something through Jesus, and maybe the books were written to help people find it, but it almost makes things more complex. And by trying to follow the rules and going through the steps, they might actually miss. And the same thing is with, actually the same thing a lot with Buddhism, because I see a lot of, you know, people would call themselves Buddhists and they go and they give food to the monks and they do all these things, but it's almost like once you put it in this format that you have to follow, then you're actually never going to reach that state of, you know, of you know, being one with love or something.
Genuineness. You're talking about genuineness, I think.
Genuine.
Right? Authenticity.
Authenticity. Absolutely. There you go. Yeah.
Okay, so I agree with you. You can't fake it. You're probably not going to fool an omnipotent being.
Yeah, right.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, C.S. Lewis wrote a really interesting book that was not meant to be theology exactly. It was, you know, sort of a thought experiment called The Great Divorce. I don't know if you've read it, but the idea is
Lion,
that
Witch in the Wardrobe, or
yeah, he wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but
yeah,
this is not that.
Yeah, no, yeah.
So The Great Divorce is essentially the point of view character finds himself walking in this dreary, dismal, deserted town that just seems to go on and on and on and on, and it's hell. It's basically hell.
Okay.
And no, basically it is hell. And people move away from each other in hell. They're always moving out and out and out, further and further away. And so, if you could go the light years out, you'd meet the ancient, people from, like you'd meet people, and they can sort of create houses for themselves. They don't get along with each other, but they can move out away from each other and sort of create houses, anything they really want. But when it rains, the roof won't stop the rain. It's sort of an illusory place in some ways. And they can board a bus. Bus comes along, and the point of view person gets on the bus, and they go to heaven on the bus, and they get out. And different than hell, which is ever expanding, heaven is sort of this disc, and everyone's moving toward the mountains, toward God, right, toward the middle. And it's a long journey, right? But the people from hell are so insubstantial in heaven that the grass won't bend when they walk on it. It's like walking on spikes, and they can walk on the rivers because they can't affect the water in any way because they're so insubstantial. And their loved ones come to them there and tell them, like, come with us and you can become substantial, and you can become like, you become more real the closer you get to the source of all reality. Come with us. And these people, and again, this isn't theology exactly, this is a thought experiment, but the idea being that actually, as the action unfolds, most of these people who were in hell and come to visit heaven, they just won't. They have their reasons why they just cannot stay in heaven. They're going back on the bus. They're going back to hell. They don't want any part of this thing, right? They're prideful, or they hang on to they nurse their grudges, or like there's something about the person that they had become in their lives that wouldn't let them accept unconditional love and grace for the things that they did that were unlovely. And so in their lives, they became either more heavenly or more hellish creatures in anticipation of what is final. And so I think a lot of Christians they look at the Bible and they say, this is a rule book, and if you break a rule, I'll scold you. And I think it's actually, and this is reductive, but for the sake of our conversation, I think the Bible is a biography about a person, and the person is God. And if you read this biography, you will learn about what an omnipotent, omnipresent, perfect being is like, what he values and doesn't value, what he likes and doesn't like, what he wants and doesn't want. And then you can try to aim at that thing, that be closer to that, and inevitably will fall short because nobody's perfect, right? But that's where the grace comes in and says, I know you're not perfect, but I know that you are reaching for me, and I'm going to reach for you too, right? And for the people who reject that reach, their wishes are honored. They don't go toward the mountains. They go out and out and out their own way. But the thing is, if the source of all truth is God, then to become hellish is to become a liar, is to become a liar to yourself, is to continually spin lies and illusions, your own lies and illusions. And you've seen, and people like this, or people who lose touch with their sanity and just, everything in their life is just this sort of tortured lie,
Yeah.
right? And that's hell. That's hell, is basically losing contact with what reality is and just living in perpetual lies that are, yourself. So his image of Napoleon in hell is Napoleon pacing up and down in this grand palace light years out, blaming, well, it was Wellington's fault, it was Josephine's fault, it was everybody else's fault but mine, and he's alone, and that's hell.
Yeah.
And to me that makes a lot of sense, right, in terms of what that means with the choice, the gentlemanly offer that you get, that you can hang out with me or you can not, you can become more heavenly or more hellish. And so it's an interesting read. If you found it and read it, I'd be really interested to know what you thought about it.
That's not, no, oh, that was, I wrote
The Great Divorce.
What you think. That's Great Divorce. Okay, I didn't write that. Okay, cool, yeah. No, that's interesting there. Well, I'll and this is good. I'd like to do this again too. I want to wrap it up with that final question I mentioned with, because it does kind of, it kind of continues from this, because I visualize, I guess that would be another problem I have, and I don't know, it might not necessarily be the case, but would be like, it's almost like, and so this will kind of tie it into like psychology, like we are almost, and this definitely, this life is like, so there is some sort of test, but it's like there are those people that they create their own hell on earth, and it wouldn't make sense to punish them. They'd get another chance. I mean, would you believe they have that? And whether it's, I mean, that's kind of what I like looking at, like this karmic. It's like, okay, you didn't make it this time around, you're going to start where you left off. That's kind of the idea. Not, like I said, it's not necessarily what I believe, but it's kind of just the way I think about it, is that the way we finally, our last, how we die, no matter how we lived our life, but the goal would be to leave at a higher, closer to God or something, than we came in. And we'd get these times to if we didn't quite make the mark, but we had maybe made some improvements and we're able to do it again. I mean, I guess just from philosophically on Christianity, would those people that do they have another chance at coming back? I mean, do they have a time, opportunity?
I don't think Christians by and large believe in reincarnation. I don't think I do, but I do think
ability to escape from hell, or
well, so I mean, the Catholics have like purgatory, right? Protestants not so much. I think the Orthodox do have some, purgatory ideas, right? So it depends on where you sit, right? But I think the problem of evil and the problem of suffering and the problem of a final judgment were problems for me too for a long time, with relation to whether or not I was going to convert to a religion, right, to an Abrahamic faith. And then I thought, well, actually, what you're doing is, and this was, to me, I'm not saying this to you, but like what came to me is, are you trying to shove the Almighty out of the judgment chair and be like, let me decide if you're just and fair, who is the author of what is just and fair, right? And like, who has perfect knowledge of the hearts and souls and lives and thoughts and feelings and beliefs of other people completely. Mm-hmm. His creations that he knows perfectly at every level, like every hair on your head, right? And I'm going to go, well, you're not just enough and fair enough, so I'm not going to worship you. Well, this doesn't take the concept of God very seriously, does it? Because if you really believe that such a being existed, and then you say, well, you're not just enough for me, you're a flea. What are you talking about, right? For me, that's what it came to be. And so I just came to a place where it's like, well, I don't understand who goes up and who goes down. I don't make that decision. I don't want that decision. If I was given that decision, I would screw it up. So like, I'm going to be hands off about this, and I'm going to say, I assume that the being that I'm calling the highest good, that's made out of love, will make the right decisions. Because to presume otherwise would be to presume, well, he's not really God, and he really doesn't have all these qualities. And in fact, I'm actually kind of more moral than you are, and more scrupulous, which I definitely am not.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I kind of had to let that stuff go and just be like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know who goes up and who goes down. It's not my place. But I have enough on my plate, trying to keep an eye on myself. Like, I'm not a perfect person. There are things I do or have done I wish I didn't or shouldn't, right? And so keeping an eye on myself for the rest of my life is like a full-time job.
Yeah.
And I tend to think about it in terms of like, not that I know who's going to go up and who's going to go down, because the truth is I don't know. And it's not my job to figure that out. My job here is to try to love people, and not to be destructive, as I know that I can be destructive, and not do things that I know are wrong, even though sometimes I do. And so that's sort of where I went with it, because I think if you take the notion of God seriously, then the idea that I have moral qualms with you,
Yeah.
that betrays a certain amount of like pride, or like imagining that you're morally more sensible than the one who inscribed morals on the universe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah. So yeah. So on my my final question, which was my this is what I researched, and I guess in some ways I'm looking for a concept that is able to, although it's going to be different for everybody, and their religious views or spiritual views are going to influence it. At the core, I have a theory that we should prepare for our deaths. In general, in society, I think we've kind of, there's a lot of death anxiety, maybe, and part of it, and there's death anxiety, and there's not. We don't address death. We kind of try to avoid talking about it, and I've really kind of just become almost fascinated with the concept of death, and that I'm going to die, and that I want to actually like kind of create like my land that I'm having. So I'm like, we're living kind of far out. The jungle is like an acre and a half, and I'm just like planting all these trees and walkways, and I'm trying to create a peaceful place for me someday to die. This is where I want to die. I'm not going to die in a hospital. So I have, and so in my research, I was doing interviews on people who've lost a loved one. I'm trying to get the experience of death, and I was surprised how people at first they would say they don't have specific. At first, it would be almost defensive, where it's like, I don't care how I die. I'm completely doesn't matter when I die. I know it's going to happen, or I know I'll die sometime, and they don't worry about it. But to me, at the same time, that view was kind of, still, it's avoiding death. It's leaving it up to chance, which of course we do have to accept the fact that we could die at any moment. But given the circumstances that it's not something that just happens, and you are able to go out, like you're gonna die. Imagine that you don't die from terrible diseases that are painful and all these things. Do you have an ideal way to die? Basically, and when I frame it, it's not meant to actually be directly. I mean, even somebody who believes that they just die, it's over, whatever, it's eternal blackness, and it never comes back, or you're reincarnated, or you have eternal life. Although that might have some influence, I actually think that it makes sense for anybody to kind of just have that. So do you have it? Do you have a ideal death, basically? Yeah.
The good death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And have you planned for it? Do you have it envisioned? And is your life in that way? Yeah.
No, I don't have some detailed idea of how I'd like it to be.
Sure.
I assume I won't see it coming. Maybe I will, maybe I'll take sick.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it did strike me during COVID how many people were hysterical to learn that they were going to die and that they were mortal.
Yeah.
And it really seemed to rattle a lot of cages. And I think a lot of people of faith weren't having that same problem because they're all pretty aware.
Yeah.
And think about the eternal things a little bit, maybe more than if you're kind of secular and you kind of just think it's all material, or you just don't think about it much because Americans warehouse their old people someplace. They don't have to watch them die.
Yeah. That's a huge problem.
And I don't want to say like I'm not afraid of it because if it's a frightening situation, maybe I will be frightened, right? Or if it's very painful, maybe that will be a frightening thing. But I want to say, like, as you were asking the question, a poem came to my mind by Wisława Szymborska called On Death Without Exaggeration. And if you'll indulge me, I'll just read it to you and hear what you think.
Yeah.
So, as you probably know, Wisława Szymborska was a Polish poet who won the Nobel Prize for Literature, one of my favorite poets. And this is called On Death Without Exaggeration. It can't take a joke, find a star, make a bridge. It knows nothing about weaving, mining, farming, building ships, or baking cakes. In our planning for tomorrow, it has the final word, which is always beside the point. It can't even get the things done that are part of its trade: dig a grave, make a coffin, clean up after itself. Preoccupied with killing, it does the job awkwardly, without system or skill, as though each of us were its first kill. Oh, it has its triumphs, but look at its countless defeats, missed blows, and repeat attempts. Sometimes it isn't strong enough to swat a fly from the air. Many are the caterpillars that have outcrawled it. All those bulbs, pods, tentacles, fins, trachea, nuptial plumage, and winter fur show that it has fallen behind with its half-hearted work. Ill will won't help, and even our lending a hand with wars and coups d'etat is so far not enough. Hearts beat inside eggs, baby skeletons grow, seeds hard at work sprout the tiny pair of leaves, and sometimes even tall trees fall away. Whoever claims that it's omnipotent is himself living proof that it's not. There's no life that couldn't be immortal if only for a moment. Death always arrives by that very moment too late. In vain it tugs at the knob of the invisible door. As far as you've come can't be undone.
I like that. Yeah, that actually, there's something. I think Sam Harris said something. He said something. There's a couple parts that reminded me. The one line that I liked that the whole time you were reading that one line I was hearing is just like death makes a mockery out of everything we do. Like, I mean, basically, all these things that are, in a sense, and so I guess, like when I think about it, it's, I guess part of what, and it might be because I don't have a religion, so in a sense I am creating my own, and I'm creating my own path. And for me, and so if you are, so it might not be as significant to you to do, but like for me, I'm, by creating the death I want to have, it's giving me a clear path on how to live my life. And the, like, even if we don't have it, most of it is actually, when I think about how I want to die, it's more of the things I don't want to have. Like I said, all those things, regrets and resentment and obviously pain. it's not important that I have people with me, or actually I in a way I want to be by myself, like I don't know, an animal going out in the I'd like to just be in nature in a way. I'd like to have communications on my last days with loved ones, but that very moment of death, I don't think it's important. So I create all these things. So I guess I don't know, in some ways I wonder, is that I mean, in a way, I feel like, okay, that is my connection with what one might call God, by creating this ideal way to go. But at the same time, I think even for somebody, and for me, I tend to, like I mentioned, this karmic thing, that final moment, I feel like that's could feel like it lasts for an eternity, or maybe it does, like, or that's the thing that goes on. So whether that final moment is going to be the one that goes into this eternal realm, which would be more in line with like an Abrahamic faith, that's it, that, or if it's reincarnated and then eventually maybe would go, that's usually, I mean, it might get reincarnated and eventually make it to that, like if it didn't quite reach the state it should. But even in the case that it were eternal blackness, that it still would seem like somebody would want to achieve that. It still would, why would you want that last thought to be anything other than like content, right? I mean, why would, it would, I mean, I guess that would be the worst thing. A lot of when I visualize death, it's not, I don't want it to be terrified or resentful or something. So is that, I don't know, I guess, does that relate to Christianity in some way or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think there are definitely impulses, Christians are not. People feel like, here's something that I really can't control, and I want to, so I'm going to try to control it by, having everything in order. I don't know when I'm going to die, but I have all my affairs in order, against the day when it comes, because it'll come, right?
Yeah.
Interestingly, I stumbled on a book called Imagine Heaven. Imagine Heaven, I think it's called. And it's essentially a guy who sought out like people who had near-death experiences and asked them about, what happened.
Yeah.
And started to look into the literature of that and found that, and he was not a believer of anything, I think, when he started, but like as he's getting into this and starting to aggregate the data, that people in a large percentage of cases were describing something that jived with Christian afterlife stuff, that there were certain recurring patterns, not in every case, but that very often that was sort of something, and they would, in some cases, know things that they couldn't have known, or like say that they would see their bodies and the people who were working on them, and then could describe not only what people in the room were doing, but like if they drifted out into the hall, what people out in the hall were doing that they couldn't have sensed.
Yeah.
Or like there was one where I guess this woman was drifting up out of the building, out of the hospital, up and up and up. And she notices that in one windowsill on a certain floor, there's a shoe. Who knows how it got there, but there's a shoe. And so when she came back, she's like, oh, there's a shoe on this floor. But like she came in unconscious. She didn't approach from that side of the hospital, stuff like that, like weird.
Yeah.
And there was a story in at one point about this university professor who was a total secular materialist kind of liberal guy, and he went to Paris and he got sick on a Saturday, which apparently is not a thing you should do in Paris because the surgeons are out or whatever. And so he ends up dying, and he's in the hospital and people are talking to him and trying to draw him away. And so he goes with them, and at some point they lead him out to this dark place and they start to like take pieces out of him and like beat him and hurt him. And something tells him like, call on God. He's like, I don't believe in God. I'm not calling on God. And they're like really going after him. Like he knows that he can't die from it, but it would be mortal blows.
Yeah.
If it were like not spiritual. And it's like, call on God, call on God. So finally he does. And like this ray of light reaches down and like takes him out of that place. And he's like, has this taste of heaven and speaks with Christ, who says, the world is a school and you're there to learn how to love and you're not ready yet, and sent him back. And this guy like changed his life. He converted to Christianity. I think he became a pastor. His wife was like very atheistic liberal and like left him, and like he goes around and talks about his experience. But so I read this and thought, well, that's a really interesting book, but it also represents like I suppose a kind of scientific body of literature, because you're aggregating what a number of people have said, and these are verifiable claims. If it's like people knowing things they couldn't have known or seeing things they couldn't have seen, and so really interesting book. That you might enjoy, you might think was interesting.
I've read actually a lot of research on that in my research on near-death experiences, and there were similar instances like that. So I'm able to see that's one area that I actually didn't, because my research was on the experience of death. I did mention that a little bit in one part, but that's like, it was more from a secondhand
right
perspective, but that was an area that I actually didn't want to get into, just because it was, that's a whole nother that would be a different research
right
question and everything. But no, it is amazing thing. I mean, so yeah, no, I mean, okay, yeah, I'm gonna I appreciate you coming. I'd like to do these in the future. I don't know where it's going. I'm just doing these.
yeah
Go to make connections, and then in the future, now I've we got life story stuff, and I'd like to get like topics more organized in the future. If I have you back, yeah, I'll maybe give you a little something in advance or something. I'm not sure where I'm taking it, but hopefully I help make or
did we do this for 2.5 hours?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. It's nice.
It just flew by. It's great to talk to you, man.
Yeah. You too. No, it's been so. It's. I really appreciate this. I mean, having this, format to communicate, and like I said, that I think there's some of my podcasts get like 20 people listening or something, but I think
that's all
people
right.
that do listen to, what I mean, that there might be some people that really are able to take something away from it, but that's not the purpose. It's really, just to meet and talk to you. But I don't think if we didn't have this, what are the odds that we'd sit and talk for so long?
Well, if you were around, I'm sure we'd go have a beer and whatever. Yeah. But like, I want to ask you, just as we close out, you said that you've wanted part of what we do here to be like modeling how people with different perspectives can have a respectful conversation. How do you think we did? I think we did pretty good.
I think we did well. Yeah, no, exactly. And that we can have a conservative atheist, or at least a right-leaning atheist is still a possibility, perhaps. Or I'm not atheist. I'm happy to not be called an atheist. Also, I don't necessarily. But then if I'm a theist, then what? I don't know. Yeah, we can call it. I guess agnostic is commonly used. But yeah, I mean, I think we did well. I think we did well, and I think there's a need for that kind of, because we do get in like I say, whether it's I hate being short on text sometimes. I'm connected, like I said. I mean, I have stayed connected with you through the years, but so surface, and at the same time, I feel I do. I mean, I don't catch it all, but every once in a while something just pops up, and it makes me think about you and wonder and stuff. And it's like, even without but it'd be so easy to just be like, oh, that was cool, and just forget about. Oh yeah,
Sure.
I mean, I
Sure.
do just usually forget about something, but something that just let's.
Mhm.
I think we could have a fun, deep conversation, and that whatever that post was specifically was enough to just kind of generate me. Yeah, this is,
Sure.
and in a sense, I feel like it is. This conversation is a conversation that that other people, maybe I'm not able to have this conversation with other people, and
Right.
we had it for them, and
Right.
I think there's people I talk to that could put themselves in your position and get to hear what I'm saying or something,
Sure.
and everything. So I appreciate it. Thank you. And
Right, thank you very much for having me. It was great to talk to you.
okay,
Let's do it again when we can. Take
all
care,
right,
my friend.
excellent. Yeah, you have a good night there. It's midday for me. All right.
All right, take it
All
easy.
right. See you. Thanks.